They said the JAS-39 Gripen was overrated. They said it was too light, too small, and too underpowered to challenge real frontline fighters. They said it survived only on paper. Good marketing and good maneuver charts, but no place against heavier, faster jets in a real daylight fight. On Western briefing boards, it was labeled a defender, not a predator. Yet on a cold NATO exercise range far from any cameras or headlines, a lone Swedish Gripen rolled into the merge against aircraft everyone believed it could not match. Instead of retreating, it turned straight toward them, not with speed and not with brute force, but with something the critics never measured, which was control of the fight itself. So when a jet most pilots dismissed as overrated found itself face-to-face with elite adversaries, was a Gripen finally about to be exposed or about to rewrite its reputation forever? Welcome to Hidden Valor. The word overrated had been attached to the Gripen since the day it entered international comparison charts. Too small, too light, and too narrow in role. At NATO evaluation centers, the analysts were clinical, stating it was excellent for national defense, but not designed for sustained air superiority, and would struggle in multi-axis engagements. The assumption followed a simple logic. The Gripen carried a single engine, a light fuel load, and reduced weapon capacity compared to heavyweights like the F-15, F-16, or Eurofighter Typhoon. Paper strength belonged to horsepower, but Sweden had not built the Gripen to win charts. It had built it to win airspace over home terrain. The exercise took place over the Baltic Sea. It was cool daylight with clean visibility. Participating jets came from multiple nations, including F-16 Fighting Falcons, Eurofighter Typhoons, support from NATO AWACS, and one Swedish Gripen acting as a solo aggressor. Most pilots expected the Gripen to struggle calling a knife in a gunfight. Inside the Swedish briefing room, the mood was different. Gripen doctrine focused on one core principle, which was never fight the enemy fight. The strengths of the jet were not speed or payload. They were exceptional instantaneous turn rate, rapid nose point authority, responsive digital flight controls, and data link integration that gave pilots precise battlespace awareness. Instead of brute force energy fights, Gripen pilots were trained to collapse the problem into geometry, forcing opponents into low-speed turning battles they did not want. The fighters launched in sequence. F-16s climbed fast to altitude to establish energy dominance. Typhoons took mid-height patrol zones. The Gripen stayed low deliberately beneath the early merge layers, feeding off AWACS data while running silent radar. It was shaping the engagement before anyone else realized the fight had started. 2 Falcons peeled off and dove to investigate. This was the first opening Sweden wanted. The Gripen accelerated toward them. At 20 miles, the F-16S tried to push vertical, seeking top-down missile position. The Gripen refused to climb. Instead, it pulled into a sharp horizontal turn, carving a near-perfect circle in the sky and compressing the engagement range brutally fast. The jets met in the merge, and the fight became visual. Immediately, the Gripen showed its hand. Rather than banking wide, it snapped its nose around faster than the Falcon pilots expected, forcing both Americans into correction maneuvers. The Swedish pilot turned into the space between them, utilizing blind geometry that no training manual illustrated. In seconds, a compact Delta Canard slipped behind the trailing Falcon. The gun sight stabilized, and the radio cracked, confirming the Gripen scored. Silence followed because the smallest jet in the fight had just secured the first kill. Across the exercise airspace flight, leads began recalculating. The NATO plan shifted. No more solo intercepts. The next engagement would be a 2-ship bracket attack designed to overwhelm the lightweight fighter with numbers and energy. The Swedish pilot did not increase power. He reduced it because numbers meant nothing if angles could be controlled. He turned toward the approaching F-16 pair. The Falcons arrived high and fast, trying for a vertical split attack. The goal was to drive the Gripen into predictable defensive geometry, but the Gripen refused to comply. It knifed between both attack paths, tightening its turn radius to a degree neither Falcon expected. The fight collapsed into a low-speed turning spiral, which was the worst possible zone for heavier fighters. One Falcon overshot, and the second bled speed too rapidly. The Gripen slid inside both circles, and the gun's sight aligned again. Another simulated kill registered. At that word, the Typhoons closed in. Eurofighters were different animals with powerful control, laws, designed to compete inside the merge. Now the Gripen faced a real test. Two Typhoons approached from lateral quarters, forcing the Gripen to defend. The pilot rolled inverted and dove sharply, baiting one Typhoon downward while turning tight against the other. The sky collapsed into chaos. For the first time in the exercise, the Gripen took pressure. A Typhoon pilot caught a simulated Fox shot, forcing the Gripen into evasive brake turns. This was no longer domination. It was survival. Fuel clocks ticked downward rapidly. The Swedish fighter needed one more geometry collapse to reset the narrative. As the fight tightened, one Typhoon grew impatient and rolled too aggressively into the turn, creating a momentary angle overshoot. The Swedish pilot exploited it instantly. The canard snapped the nose downrange, and the gun sight crossed the target. Third simulated kill. But this time the radio did not celebrate because exercise control announced the Gripen was out of fuel. The Swedish pilot acknowledged and broke away. The scoreboard was undeniable. Gripen 3 gun kills. NATO fighters 1 simulated kill. The myth of overrated was cracking beyond repair. The debrief room was cold. On the central screen, frozen frames showed where dogfights had collapsed into knots of geometry. An American instructor stood with arms crossed and admitted they outnumbered and outclimbed the Gripen, but they did not outfight it. Data showed the Gripen was winning by entering the fight space nobody wanted to admit existed, which consisted of slow, tight, unforgiving turns where angles mattered more than horsepower. One Typhoon pilot finally spoke, admitting that chasing the Gripen was like trying to chase a knife with a sword. For the Swedish flight lead, this was validation of decade-old doctrine. The Gripen was not meant to dominate battles. It was designed to disrupt them. NATO evaluation summary findings stated that lightweight fighter platforms employing superior turn rates and situational awareness can produce decisive outcomes against heavier airframes. Translated into pilot language, this meant speed does not mean control. Informal conversations outside the briefing room turned candid. One instructor wrote in his notebook to never underestimate doctrine, because jets do not fight, pilots fight. The myth began to crack officially when observers noted the Gripen demonstrated unexpected offensive agility. The Swedish pilot never sought attention. He signed off flight hours and left base quietly. That night, someone asked him if the jet was overrated. He smiled faintly and said no, just misunderstood. The final exercise communique circulated quietly between planning commands, carrying a single uncomfortable message. The Gripen was no underdog anymore. Reputations had shifted. One Typhoon flight instructor later remarked to students to never chase a small jet into its comfort zone. Gripen was not built to dominate the skies, it was built to defend them. Yet in the merge where discipline overrides hardware, the little jet reminded the world of something modern air power tends to forget. The smallest blade is deadliest when it cuts at the right angle. Critics still repeat the old phrase overrated. But those who sat inside cockpits across from it no longer do, because reputations are built on brochures and shattered in the turning fight. Hidden Valor remembers the aircraft others dismissed not because it made headlines, but because it earned respect where only skill commands inside the circle.